What would you do if the very moment you stepped into your workplace, someone looked you in the eye and decided you weren't worthy of being there? Not because you lacked skill, not because you made a mistake, but because of something you never chose: your skin, your story, your existence. That's exactly what happened to Captain Marcus Hale, a black CEO turned pilot with 20 years of spotless flight experience, when a flight attendant tore his credentials in half, accused him of lying, and tried to strip him of everything he had earned. Right there, in front of a plane full of strangers. And in that split second, Marcus faced a choice none of us ever wished to make: stay silent and let prejudice define him, or stand tall and reclaim his truth. If it were you, cornered, humiliated, your dignity on the line, what choice would you make? What would you be willing to fight for? This is not just a story about injustice. It's about a man who refused to bow, even when the world tried to erase him. If you're ready, take a breath and step with me into the moment everything changed. Before we begin, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps bring stories like this to light. The late afternoon sun pressed through the tall windows of Chicago O'Hare, turning the entire concourse into a river of orange reflections that shimmered on polished floors. People moved like waves, dragging suitcases, juggling coffee cups, and catching last-minute calls before boarding. It was busy in the way airports always were at this hour, but something about the light made it feel softer, almost gentle, almost. Captain Marcus Hale walked quietly toward Gate C-17, his rolling suitcase humming behind him. His uniform was crisp, the deep navy fabric neatly pressed, the silver wings on his chest catching small flashes of sunlight. After 27 years of flying, he still took pride in appearances, not out of vanity, but out of respect. Respect for the profession, respect for the responsibility, respect for the trust hundreds of passengers placed in him each day. At 52, Marcus carried the kind of calm that only comes from living through storms most people never talk about. A calm forged from discipline, from long nights in cramped hotels, from silent prayers spoken at 36,000 feet when weather radar turned red. He had flown through turbulence bad enough to shake the bones out of a man. He had guided aircraft through crosswinds that would make a younger pilot's hands tremble. And through it all, he had learned to breathe slowly, speak softly, and let the truth settle like dust after a commotion. He passed the cafe near the gate. A young mother feeding her baby smiled at him. An older couple nodded respectfully. A few aviation enthusiasts whispered among themselves, recognizing the seasoned captain who had made the news a decade ago for safely landing a crippled aircraft with only one thrust reverser. Moments like that warmed Marcus more than he admitted. But peace, especially for a black man in a position of authority, rarely lasted long. As Marcus approached the gate podium, the flight attendant standing behind it stiffened. Her name tag read Ava Thompson. She looked like she was in her early 30s, sharp-featured, well-kept, with a polished bun and makeup applied just thin enough to look natural. But her eyes tightened the moment they landed on him. Not in recognition, not in respect. In suspicion, Marcus offered a gentle nod. "Good afternoon, Captain Hale," checking in for pre-board. Ava didn't smile. She glanced at his uniform, then at the iPad in front of her, then back at him. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Can I see your ID badge?" she asked. The tone wasn't polite, it wasn't standard, it wasn't even neutral. It carried an edge Marcus had grown familiar with long before he ever stepped into a cockpit. He kept his voice warm. Of course. He unclipped his ID and handed it over. Ava held it like it might burn her fingers. She squinted as if searching for something wrong. "Are you sure this is you?" she asked. A ripple of tension rolled quietly through Marcus's chest. Not anger, not surprise. Just a tired kind of ache, deep, familiar, and older than his uniform. "Yes, that is me," he said. Ava compared the photo to Marcus's face. "Back to the badge. Back to him." She shook her head slightly. "Your badge looks worn," she said. "It is 7 years old," Marcus replied softly. "Badges age, people age." A man standing nearby overheard and frowned, looking from Ava to Marcus. Another passenger paused mid-step. Ava turned the badge over as if she expected it to reveal a secret crime. I'm going to need a second form of verification. That won't be necessary, Marcus answered, not sharply but firmly. My name is on the crew manifest. Ava's expression hardened. I don't see why you would object. Unless there's a reason you don't want your credentials verified. A few people glanced over. Phones began to lift, almost instinctively. The air shifted the way it does when something wrong begins to unfold. Marcus took a slow breath, feeling the weight of every eye on him. I'm not objecting, he said quietly. I'm reminding you, there's a process. Ava crossed her arms. Well, I don't feel comfortable with this process. Not until I'm sure you are who you say you are. Her voice grew sharper, loud enough for people at the gate to hear, loud enough to invite judgment from strangers. Marcus saw it coming before it arrived. Disbelief. Suspicion. Whispers. He doesn't look like a captain. Is he lying? Why is she questioning him? A few passengers stepped farther back, almost reflexively. A heaviness began to settle inside Marcus, the kind that carried too many memories, memories of being followed through stores as a teen, memories of investors doubting his competence because he was young and black, memories of being questioned, challenged, dismissed, even when he stood in full uniform, silver stripes and wings and decades of proof. Ava held the badge up between two fingers. This doesn't look valid to me. Then she said the sentence that cracked the moment open. You're lying about who you are. The words floated in the air, cutting through the low hum of the terminal like a blade. Several passengers gasped. One pulled out her phone completely, recording openly now. A man in athletic wear shook his head disapprovingly at Marcus, as if he had already judged him guilty. Marcus didn't move, didn't flinch. He simply felt his chest tighten in that slow, familiar way injustice had a habit of doing. Ava, Marcus said gently, please return my ID. But Ava stepped back, raised her hand. Security, she called out sharply. I need assistance, right now. Two airport security officers turned toward her voice and walked briskly toward the podium. Heavy black boots clicked with purpose. Their expressions were already tense before they even reached the gate. What's the situation? One asked. Ava pointed to Marcus. This man is trying to access the cockpit. He's presenting questionable identification. I believe he's lying. She didn't say captain. She didn't say pilot. She didn't even say passenger. Just this man. Marcus felt something old and deeply rooted twist beneath his ribs, but his voice remained calm. Officers, he said. I am the captain assigned to this flight. My name is on the manifest. My credentials are correct. Ava cut in. Do not listen to him. I don't trust him, and I don't feel safe. The officers exchanged a look, quick, automatic, conditioned. Sir, one of them said stiffly, step back from the gate desk. Keep your hands where we can see them. A painful quiet formed around Marcus. He could feel the judgment, feel the eyes that saw only uniform color, not the decades behind it. Feel the fear, not directed at Ava, but at him. He raised his hands slowly, not because he had to, because he had lived long enough to know that sometimes raising your hands kept the moment from escalating into something worse. Ava, standing slightly behind the officers now, looked triumphant, the kind of triumph that came not from truth, but from power misplaced, misused, misdirected. Marcus spoke softly. You're making a mistake. Ava laughed faintly, shaking her head. No, I'm stopping one. But as the officers reached for Marcus's ID, ready to take control of the situation, Marcus saw something shift behind them, a familiar face in a blazer. A younger man with sandy blonde hair and soft eyes full of concern. First Officer Evan Blake, walking quickly toward the group, brows furrowed as he took in the scene. Captain Hale, Evan said, stepping beside him. Is everything okay? A ripple of surprise crossed the officers' faces. A few passengers stopped recording. Ava froze. Evan turned to the officers. He's the captain. He's my captain. We're flying together today. The officers hesitated. Ava's expression faltered. But the damage, Marcus knew, had already been done. He lowered his hands slowly, exhaled, and felt a heaviness gather in his chest, like a storm cloud waiting to break. He said nothing more, because he had learned long ago that sometimes silence carried more truth than 100 arguments. And because some storms, no matter how old you are, still hurt when they return. The part ended on that quiet note, heavy and waiting, the moment before the real story begins. For a long moment after the confrontation, Marcus stood quietly beside the gate podium, letting the noise of the concourse settle around him. People continued to board, dragging their roller bags past him carefully, as if afraid to brush too close. A few glanced at him awkwardly, unsure whether to trust the version of events they had just witnessed or the calm, dignified man standing before them. He didn't blame them. People believed what they were shown, and they'd just seen a black man accused of lying loudly, publicly, confidently by someone they perceived as an authority figure. It wasn't the first time he had faced that dance between perception and truth, but each time it happened, something inside him stretched a little tighter. Evan Blake, his first officer, stood at his side now, jaw clenched, eyes flicking with barely contained frustration. "I don't understand," Evan said quietly. "Why would she do that? It's like she went straight for the worst possible assumption." Marcus didn't look at him. His gaze stayed fixed on the large glass windows, where a 737 sat bathed in orange sunlight, waiting to be flown. "There are some assumptions people carry before they even hear your voice," Marcus said softly. "Sometimes they're louder than anything you can say." Evan exhaled, shaking his head. "But you didn't even do anything." Marcus smiled faintly. "That's the thing, Evan. Sometimes doing nothing is enough." The younger man looked down, his face pinched with discomfort. "It's wrong," he murmured. "Yes," Marcus replied. "It is." He appreciated Evan's frustration. There was honesty in it, the kind that only comes from a person who has never had to live with such moments but recognizes the injustice anyway. But for Marcus, the emotions came from a deeper well. A well dug not in a day or a month or a bad shift, but across an entire lifetime. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting memories rise. He was 12 again, standing beside his father outside a small hardware store in Birmingham, Alabama. His father, a tall, quiet man who worked double shifts at a steel mill, held a bag of nails and sandpaper. They had paid. They had a receipt. But the store manager had followed them out. "Let me see that bag," the man demanded. His father's jaw tightened. Marcus remembered how still he became, like a mountain deciding whether to crumble or remain whole. "We already paid," his father had said calmly. The manager snatched the receipt and examined it with exaggerated suspicion. Marcus remembered the shame burning his cheeks, the humiliation leaking into his bloodstream like something poisonous. He remembered wishing the ground would swallow him whole. Finally, the manager shoved the receipt back. "Don't try anything funny next time," he muttered. It was the next time that stuck with Marcus, as if they were naturally suspect, as if guilt was something inherited. His father had walked away without a word. Later that night, Marcus had asked, "Why didn't you say anything?" "Dad?" His father looked at him with tired eyes that had carried a whole century of battles they never chose. "Because sometimes, son, the cost of speaking is heavier than the cost of silence." Marcus didn't understand it fully then. He understood it now. Back in the present, Marcus opened his eyes. The weight in his chest eased only slightly. Evan watched him closely. "Sir, are you okay?" Marcus nodded. "I've been through worse." He picked up his flight bag and began walking toward the jet bridge. Evan fell into step beside him. But behind them, whispers continued to ripple through the gate area. Some passengers recorded discreetly. Others murmured to each other, unable to break free from the impressions Ava had planted. Marcus felt every whisper like a small pebble tossed into a pond, each one spreading ripples farther than the one before. He stepped onto the jet bridge, the cool, enclosed corridor humming with ventilation. Each step echoed faintly. "Captain," Evan said, his voice low, "if there's anything you want me to report, anything at all, I'll back you up." Marcus paused, turned slightly toward the young man. "Thank you, Evan," he said. "But the truth tends to reveal itself in time." Evan frowned gently. "Maybe, but sometimes the truth needs a little help." Marcus gave him a long, quiet look. He appreciated Evan's spirit, his willingness to speak up. It reminded him of himself at 29, fierce, idealistic, unwilling to let wrong things stay wrong. But experience had carved more cautious lines into Marcus's mind, lines that whispered of consequences and the fine balance between justice and escalation. "We'll see how things unfold," Marcus said softly. They stepped into the aircraft. The cabin was still empty. Overhead lights glowed warmly, rows of seats lined up in quiet anticipation. The faint scent of disinfectant lingered in the air, a scent Marcus had come to associate with long hours, late nights, and places he would briefly call home before moving on to another city. He walked toward the cockpit, but something made him pause at the threshold between the galley and the main cabin. A memory, uninvited but sharp, tugged at him again. He was 26, newly promoted to first officer, still full of awe for the uniform and eager to prove himself. One winter morning, during pre-flight checks, a senior gate agent had looked at him and said, "You're early. The pilots aren't here yet." Marcus had smiled kindly, thinking it was a harmless misunderstanding. "I'm one of them," he had replied. The agent blinked, then frowned. "You? Really?" Her voice held the same tone Ava used today, a tone Marcus had carried in the back of his mind for 27 years, the tone that questioned his right to stand where he stood. "Captain," Evan called from the cockpit doorway. Marcus blinked back to the present. "Yes," he said, stepping inside. He set his bag down, took his seat, and began his routine with practiced movements, switches, screens, instruments, everything familiar, everything steady. The cockpit was where his heartbeat finally matched the rhythm of something he trusted. Yet today, even the reassuring hum of electronics could not completely drown out the tremor of something unsettled. A few minutes later, Ava stepped aboard. Her footsteps were sharp and confident, the sound of someone who believed she owned the space she walked in. She didn't acknowledge Marcus. She didn't look at him. Instead, she greeted Evan with a forced brightness, as if the earlier scene had never happened. "Are you ready for a smooth flight?" she asked, her smile a little too polished. Evan offered a professional nod. "We'll do our best." Ava glanced briefly toward Marcus, just long enough for him to see the disdain tugging at the corners of her lips. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was unmistakable. The kind of look that said, "I don't think you belong here." For a moment, Marcus felt a familiar spark of irritation rise. It tugged at his composure, wanting to push past years of self-control. But he breathed deeply instead. In, hold, out. He had weathered storms far more violent than a cruel look. He turned back to the overhead panel and continued his checks. Ava walked away, but tension lingered in her wake like a faint, unpleasant perfume. Evan sat down, buckling in. He leaned slightly closer. "Captain, she's not done," he whispered. "I can feel it." Marcus didn't look at him. "I know. And you're still this calm?" Evan asked, incredulous. A soft sigh left Marcus's lips. "Calm isn't something you learn in a classroom," he said. "It's something life teaches you when it tries to break you." Evan watched him for a long moment. "That doesn't make it fair." "No," Marcus said. "It doesn't." He flipped another switch, letting the low electronic chime settle into the quiet. "But fairness," he continued, "was never guaranteed. Not to me, not to people like me." Evan looked down, his face sinking with understanding. "People like you." The words hung in the air, even though Marcus never said them aloud. He didn't have to. They were carved into the history of countless men before him. Men who had studied harder, worked longer, walked straighter, spoken softer, because the world weighed their existence differently. Marcus had hoped, quietly, that things were changing, that decades of progress meant something, that the next generation wouldn't feel the same tightness in the chest he carried. But moments like today reminded him how fragile progress could be. He finished the last of his pre-flight checks and finally looked at Evan with a small but steady smile. "Whatever happens next," Marcus said gently, "we'll navigate it. That's what pilots do." Evan nodded, though worry still clouded his expression. And as passengers began to board, as murmurs drifted down the aisle and quiet glances floated toward the cockpit, Marcus Hale reminded himself of something his mother used to say whenever life felt unfair. "The sky is still yours, baby. Don't let them make you forget it." He whispered the words internally now, letting them settle his heartbeat. He had no idea how true or how necessary those words would soon become, because the real turbulence hadn't even begun. The boarding process began with its usual rhythm: families herding children forward, business travelers focused on their phones, elderly passengers moving slowly with careful steps. From the cockpit, Marcus could hear the flow of people entering the cabin, their voices merging into a low hum like distant wind drifting through tall grass. Normally, this was the moment he settled fully into work mode, the moment he let go of whatever had happened before and shifted entirely into the present. But today, he couldn't quite shake the lingering tension from the gate. Through the open cockpit door, he could see passengers glancing toward him from time to time. Some offered polite nods. Others turned their faces quickly when he met their eyes, as if they didn't want to be caught looking. One man whispered to his wife, "Is that the pilot they were arguing about?" His wife murmured something back, her expression unsure. A teenage girl stared openly for a moment before being nudged forward by her father. It wasn't open distrust, not yet, but it was curiosity shaped by uncertainty. Uncertainty someone had planted intentionally. Evan shifted in his seat. "They're still talking about it," he said quietly. Marcus didn't look away from the instrument panel. "I heard." "You shouldn't have to deal with this," Evan muttered. "No one should," Marcus said. "But here we are." A few minutes later, Ava entered the cockpit again, her heels tapping sharply against the floor. She didn't bother knocking. She leaned one shoulder against the doorframe as if she were looking into a room that didn't quite belong to her. "We've got a passenger asking to speak with the pilot," she said. Marcus didn't turn around. "What's the issue?" Ava's tone carried a sugary sweetness that felt anything but kind. "He seems concerned about safety." Evan frowned. "Concerned about what exactly?" Ava shrugged lightly, twirling a pen between her fingers. "He overheard the situation at the gate. Said he's not sure he trusts a captain who can't show valid ID without an argument." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. There it was. The first crack. The first seed of doubt she had successfully planted. There were always passengers who were nervous flyers, passengers who held on to every small piece of information, whether real or imagined. But this wasn't a natural concern. This was engineered. Marcus inhaled slowly. "Seat number?" "2 Echo," she replied. "He's waiting." Marcus finally turned to face her. His voice was calm, but his eyes held an unmistakable firmness. "I will speak with him once. Boarding is complete and we're ready to close the door." Ava blinked, surprised he didn't rush to satisfy the passenger's request. "But he said it's urgent." "I understand," Marcus replied, "but safety procedures come first, including finishing pre-flight." Ava hesitated. She didn't like being challenged, even gently. Then she smiled thinly, tightly, falsely. "Whatever you say, Captain." She walked away with a deliberate sway in her step. Evan shook his head. "She's pushing." "Of course she is," Marcus said softly. "It's what happens when someone believes they can shape the narrative." "You think she's doing this on purpose?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. He checked the overhead switches, letting the soft clicks fill the silence. Then he said quietly, "I think some people see what they expect to see. And when reality doesn't match their expectations, they'd rather bend the truth than bend their bias." Evan looked down, absorbing the weight of Marcus's words. The cabin continued filling. Luggage thumped into overhead bins. Children giggled. The faint scent of coffee drifted forward from a passenger's cup. Outside the cockpit windows, dusk settled across the tarmac, bathing everything in a cool, bluish glow. When the last rows boarded and the aisle cleared, Ava returned to the front and made a small show of straightening her uniform. She pressed the interphone button with a soft click. "Captain Hale," she said lightly, as if speaking to a troublesome coworker instead of her superior. "Seat 2E is ready when you are." Marcus rose slowly from his seat. He adjusted his tie, smoothed his uniform jacket, and took a steadying breath. Evan watched him with concern. "I'll come with you if you want." "I'll be fine," Marcus said gently. "Stay here and run the last cross-check." He stepped out into the cabin. All conversation quieted instantly. He could feel eyes sliding toward him from rows 3, 4, 5, not hostile, just curious in a way that made his skin feel slightly too tight. He walked with purpose, the softness in his steps disguised beneath years of practiced grace. As he approached row 2, a middle-aged man with graying hair stood up. His blazer marked him as a businessman. His posture marked him as someone used to being heard. Captain Hale? The man asked. Yes, Marcus said, offering a polite nod. How may I help you? The man folded his arms. I just want to make sure everything is safe for takeoff. We wouldn't fly if it wasn't, Marcus replied gently. The man shifted uncomfortably. I saw what happened at the gate, and the attendant seemed very sure that something wasn't right. Ava, standing a few feet behind Marcus, lowered her gaze in false humility, playing the role of reluctant witness. Marcus kept his tone warm. Sir, my credentials were valid. The airline has confirmed my assignment. The flight is safe. The man hesitated. She said the badge didn't look real. Marcus didn't look at Ava, didn't give her the satisfaction. Instead, he held the man's gaze. I've been flying for 27 years. I've trained over a dozen first officers and landed through conditions most people pray to avoid. I promise you, you are in safe hands. A long pause followed. Finally, the man nodded, slowly, almost sheepishly. Okay, thank you, Captain. Marcus smiled politely. You're welcome, sir. He turned to walk back to the cockpit. But as he passed Ava, she whispered under her breath, You're awfully calm for someone who nearly caused a security alert. Marcus didn't stop walking, didn't turn around, but her words hit him like a quiet slap. A familiar ache rose in him, a heaviness from years of enduring comments that questioned his competence, his authority, his identity. And just like in childhood, in that hardware store parking lot, he chose silence. Not because he was weak, not because he agreed, because responding would feed the fire she wanted to ignite. He stepped into the cockpit and closed the door gently. Evan didn't ask how it went. He could read the answer in Marcus's shoulders. 10 minutes later, during the standard safety demonstration, Marcus watched the cabin camera screen above his head. At first, everything looked normal. Then Ava began drifting toward various passengers, leaning down to speak quietly, too quietly for the interphone to catch her words. But her expressions were animated, concerned, troubled. Evan noticed it too. What's she doing now? Marcus watched her closely. His jaw tightened. She's planting more doubt. Evan exhaled sharply. Captain, this is getting out of control. Marcus didn't respond. He was watching Ava approach a mother with 2 children. The woman's face tensed as Ava whispered something. She looked toward the cockpit afterward, her brow furrowed. Then Ava moved to an older man in 1C. Another whisper, another anxious glance toward the front of the plane. Evan leaned forward, angry now. She's undermining you. Marcus's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the surface. She's undermining the chain of command, and that's dangerous. It's manipulation, Evan said. It's also a pattern, Marcus added quietly. One I've seen before. He could feel the pulse in his neck tightening. He steadied his breath, letting his mother's old words echo gently in his mind. The sky is still yours, but today, the sky felt far away, out of reach, as if someone had placed a barrier between him and the place he belonged. He watched Ava one last time on the screen. She whispered to a man in 4D. The man frowned deeply. Then he stood up. Captain, Evan said, he's coming up here. The man marched down the aisle with a stiff, nervous determination. When he reached the cockpit door, he didn't knock gently. He knocked with urgency. Marcus pressed the interphone. Yes? The man's voice trembled. I need to ask something. Are we in danger? Marcus felt his heart dip. This wasn't fear of flying. This was fear of him. Fear someone had carefully created. No, sir, Marcus answered. Everything is under control. The man hesitated. Because, she said. Marcus interrupted softly. Whatever she said, please trust that I am the captain, and I am here to get you home safely. There was a long silence. Then the man whispered, Okay, and stepped back. Marcus closed the interphone. Evan exhaled. She's tearing the flight apart. Marcus nodded slowly. And for the first time, a quiet fire began to kindle beneath his calm exterior. I know, he said. And this is only the beginning. The cabin door closed with a soft thud, sealing the aircraft from the noise of the terminal. For a moment, there was a fragile stillness like the quiet between lightning and thunder. Marcus sat in the captain's seat, his fingertips resting gently on the yoke, his posture steady despite the tension that coiled in the air around him. Passengers were buckling their seatbelts. settling bags beneath seats and preparing themselves for the journey. Normally, this was when the atmosphere softened. A shared understanding fell over everyone, a quiet trust placed in the hands of the pilots up front. But today, that trust felt fractured. On the overhead cabin camera, Marcus watched a subtle wave of unease move through the rows, like ripples across a pond. Some passengers leaned toward their neighbors, whispering behind raised hands. Others kept glancing toward the cockpit door as if expecting it to swing open with bad news. Evan glanced at the screen and shook his head in disbelief. "She's done more damage than I thought." Marcus didn't reply. He simply watched. A man in row 5 whispered to his wife, "Why would she lie? Flight attendants are supposed to know." Another woman clutched her handbag tightly, her knuckles pale. "Do you think the captain is actually licensed?" she asked the stranger next to her. Two college students exchanged uneasy glances. "Man, I don't know. That whole thing at the gate felt weird," one said. "I mean," the other whispered, "if she doesn't trust him, maybe we shouldn't either." Every comment hit Marcus like a pebble thrown into deep water, small but sinking fast. He felt the weight of it, all of it. The doubt, the suspicion, the readiness of strangers to believe the worst without asking a single question. He rested his hands on his knees for a moment, closed his eyes, let a long, slow breath ease out of him. It wasn't the turbulence outside that worried him. It was the storm brewing inside the cabin. A sudden chime interrupted the tension. "Flight deck," Ava's voice came over the interphone. "We have a passenger requesting deplaning due to safety concerns." Evan nearly jumped out of his seat. "Are you kidding me? Safety concerns?" "We haven't even taxied." Marcus pressed the button calmly. "Who is the passenger?" Ava hesitated. "Seat 4D. Marcus remembered him, the man she whispered to, the one who ended up at the cockpit door moments earlier with trembling hands. "Tell him I will speak to him before we push back," Marcus said gently. Ava's voice lacked her earlier fake sweetness. Now it sounded colder, controlled. "As you wish, Captain." She disconnected the interphone with a soft click that carried a quiet hint of irritation. Marcus inhaled slowly, steadying himself, then unbuckled and rose from his seat. As he stepped into the cabin, every conversation fell away. Shadows of worry crossed the faces around him. He walked with calm, deliberate steps, each one placed carefully, as if he were stepping across fragile glass. The man in 4D looked up, anxious, twisting his wedding ring around his finger. Marcus crouched slightly to meet his eyes. "Sir," he said softly, "I understand you're feeling uneasy. Can you tell me what's worrying you?" The man swallowed hard. I just," she said something that scared me. "Who?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. "The lead attendant," the man whispered. "She said she wasn't sure you made the right call at the gate, that she didn't feel safe flying with you." Marcus didn't react outwardly. He didn't sigh or roll his eyes or shake his head. Instead, he let silence settle for a moment, gentle, steady, grounding. When he spoke, his voice was warm and low, the kind of voice people trusted in storms. "I understand," he said. "Fear is real, and when someone in uniform tells you something that sounds alarming, your mind fills in the blanks." The man nodded, embarrassed. "Yeah, I guess so. But I want to reassure you," Marcus continued, "that this aircraft is safe. You are safe. My decisions, my credentials, and my experience are all exactly where they should be." The man's shoulders loosened. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I didn't mean to offend you." "You didn't," Marcus said gently. "You reacted like any human being would when given the wrong information." The man blinked, surprised by the kindness. "So you think I should stay on the flight?" Marcus smiled softly. "I think you should do what brings you peace. But if you stay, I promise I'll fly you home with the same care I'd want someone to show my own family." A slow breath escaped the man's lips. Then he finally nodded. "Okay, I'll stay." Marcus placed a hand briefly on his shoulder, then stood and turned back toward the cockpit. But before he could take 2 steps, he heard a quiet comment from somewhere behind him. "Smooth talker," someone muttered under their breath. "Trying to cover something up." He didn't turn around. The sting of the words brushed against his back, but he kept moving forward, keeping his stride steady. Evan watched him re-enter the cockpit with worry etched across his face. "You shouldn't have to justify yourself to passengers," he said. "No," Marcus replied, closing the door behind him. "I shouldn't." He sat down, buckled in, and let out a restrained exhale. But right now, the passengers need reassurance more than I need comfort. That's the job. Evan nodded slowly. Still, it's wrong. Marcus didn't disagree. He simply shifted his focus to the overhead panel. 5 minutes later, as the last baggage container was being loaded, Marcus prepared for pushback. He glanced at the cabin camera one more time, and something in the pit of his stomach tightened again. Ava was speaking to another passenger, this time a woman in first class. The woman's face twisted with concern, then with something like alarm. When Ava stepped away, the woman immediately pressed the call button. Her hand shook slightly. God, Evan muttered. She just won't stop. A moment later, the interphone chimed. Ava's voice filled the cockpit again. Captain Hale, a passenger up front, wants clarification about cabin safety. She says she was told there may be turbulence due to a questionable route adjustment. Evan whipped his head toward Marcus. She's making things up at this point. Marcus didn't respond. His face remained unreadable. Ava continued, her voice honeyed but pointed. Captain, don't you think it would help to reassure the passengers before we move? Evan stared at the speaker. Did she just question your judgment on the interphone? Marcus exhaled quietly, then pressed the button. Ava, he said with gentle firmness, the flight plan is correct and approved. I will address the passengers once pre-flight procedures are finished. Please continue preparing the cabin. Ava didn't speak for a few seconds. The silence was long enough to be noticeable. Then, finally, she replied, Of course, Captain. She hung up before he could say anything else. Marcus leaned back in his seat, eyes closing for a moment. Evan spoke softly. She's trying to show the passengers that she's the responsible one, and you're not. Marcus opened his eyes. Yes. Why? Marcus paused. Not because he didn't know, but because he hated how familiar the pattern was. It's easier, he said slowly, to undermine someone when everyone already expects them to fail. Evan swallowed hard. Captain, how long has this been happening to you? Marcus didn't answer for a long time. Finally, he said, long enough for me to recognize it the moment it starts. He didn't need to explain further. The truth lingered in the air between them, heavy, old, and tired. A soft knock sounded on the cockpit door. A nervous voice followed. Captain Hale? Can I speak to you? It wasn't Ava. It was the woman from first class, the one Ava had whispered to. Marcus unlocked the door and cracked it open. She stood there, wringing her hands. I don't mean to bother you. I'm scared. The flight attendant said, Well, she implied. Marcus raised a calming hand. Ma'am, he said warmly, please take your seat. I promise I will make an announcement shortly. The woman hesitated. You're sure we're safe? Marcus didn't blink. Absolutely sure. Something in his voice, quiet, steady, unwavering, made her shoulders soften. Okay, she whispered. Thank you. As she returned to her seat, Evan let out a frustrated breath. This is spiraling. Captain. Marcus stared straight ahead, his voice low. I know. You think she's trying to cause a mutiny? Marcus shook his head. Not a mutiny. Then what? A narrative, Marcus said. Evan frowned. A narrative? Marcus nodded slowly. A version of events where she looks like the hero, and I look like the threat. His voice was quiet. Too quiet. Because he understood something Evan didn't realize yet. Stories, once planted, grow roots, spread, multiply, and sometimes become harder to fight than any storm in the sky. Marcus Hale could weather turbulence, crosswinds, system failures, but nothing tested a man like the quiet erosion of trust, one whisper at a time. The engines hummed beneath the floor, a low, steady vibration that usually brought Marcus a sense of peace. Tonight, however, it sounded different, like a warning, murmuring beneath every breath. Outside the windshield, night had fallen fully, painting the ramp in streaks of amber and deep shadow. Ground crew moved like silhouettes, plugging hoses, guiding equipment, waving flashlights. The world outside was calm. Inside the aircraft, it wasn't. Marcus completed another line of his checklist, though he found himself reading each item twice, not because he doubted the aircraft, but because the distraction in the cabin had begun to seep into him like water slipping through cracks. Evan glanced up. You okay, Captain? Marcus nodded slowly. Just thinking. About her? Evan asked. About all of it, Marcus replied, his voice gentle and worn. About how fast trust can be broken when someone decides to break it. Evan's face tightened. The passengers are rattled. It's like she's trying to create a divide. Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. Evan wasn't wrong. From the cabin camera, they watched Ava move with deliberate grace, straightening a blanket here, adjusting a seatbelt there, leaning in close to certain passengers. Her expressions were rehearsed, concerned, slightly troubled, compassionate in a way that made her look like the only reasonable person in the room. Every time she leaned in, Marcus felt the tension grow a little more. Whispers spread like wildfire. A woman in row 7 whispered to her husband. She said he seemed off. What does that mean? A young man with headphones lowered his voice. This is sketchy. I don't want to fly if the crew isn't on the same page. An older gentleman frowned deeply. The captain shouldn't be questioned like this. It's alarming. Even that comment intended as support carried unease. A passenger didn't have to see sabotage to feel unsafe. They only needed doubt, and doubt was the cheapest currency in the world. It cost nothing to give. It cost everything to undo. The interphone chimed again. Ava's voice floated in, warm and falsely professional. Captain Hale, are you available? We have an issue in the forward galley. Evan's head snapped toward the speaker. She's doing it again, calling you out of the cockpit. Marcus didn't move immediately. She knows I'm required to be seated once we begin pushback. Exactly, Evan said. So she's creating conflict before we even leave the gate. Marcus sighed quietly. Then he unbuckled, standing with slow, steady movements. You stay here, he told Evan. Evan hesitated. Captain, stay, Marcus said gently. I need one steady voice in this cockpit in case anything escalates. Evan nodded reluctantly. Marcus stepped out into the dimly lit cabin. Conversations quieted again, as if someone had turned down a dial. He walked to the front galley and found Ava standing beside the coffee dispenser, arms folded, expression poised like someone ready to deliver bad news. What's the issue? Marcus asked. Ava tapped the side of the beverage machine with 2 fingers. It's not heating properly. Marcus blinked slowly. You called me out of the cockpit for a coffee machine? Ava gave a small shrug, tilting her head. Passengers expect hot drinks. It affects cabin satisfaction. We handle that after takeoff, Marcus said calmly. It's not a pre-flight safety concern. But the passengers are already uneasy, Ava replied, her eyes narrowing slightly. I thought you'd want to reassure them by addressing everything properly. Marcus studied her face for a long, quiet moment. She didn't look away. She didn't blush or shift or fidget. Instead, she held his gaze with the challenging confidence of someone who believed she had power and intended to use it. You're escalating the situation, Marcus said softly. Oh, no, she replied, placing her hand lightly on her chest. I'm just doing my job. Her tone was polite. Her eyes were not. Before Marcus could respond, a voice rose from the first row. Captain, he turned. It was the older woman Ava had spoken to earlier. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the armrest. Are we truly safe to fly? She asked. Her voice quivered with something fragile, fear born not from turbulence or bad weather, but from another person's whispered poison. Marcus stepped toward her gently. Yes, ma'am, you are safe. But she said, Ava cut in smoothly. I never said we were unsafe. I only said I wanted to make sure everything was being done properly. A murmur rippled through nearby passengers. Marcus took a quiet breath, letting calm anchor him again. We follow strict procedures, ma'am. Nothing is overlooked. The woman nodded slowly, reassured by his tone even if her eyes still carried faint worry. A man across the aisle frowned. This is ridiculous. Are you two arguing? No, Ava said quickly. Not at all. I'm just trying to keep everyone informed. Marcus didn't argue. Arguing would only feed the fire. Instead, he nodded politely to the passengers and turned back to the cockpit. But as he walked away, he heard Ava's voice drop to a whisper, barely audible, but still caught by a nearby passenger's phone microphone. I hope he's right, for all our sake. Marcus closed his eyes as he reached the cockpit door. The damage had deepened. Inside the cockpit, Evan was waiting, eyes tight with frustration. What happened? She called me out for a coffee machine, Marcus said, settling into his seat. Evan stared. A coffee machine. Marcus nodded. Evan leaned back, rubbing his forehead. She's setting you up. She wants witnesses seeing you. Respond to issues she invents. Yes, Marcus said quietly. It's a pattern. Why? Evan asked. Why would she risk her career like this? Marcus paused. A long, heavy pause filled the small cockpit. Then he said the words he had been avoiding. Because she thinks hers is safe, and she thinks mine is not. Evan swallowed hard. That's foul, he whispered. Not new, Marcus replied gently. But foul, yes. A chime interrupted them. This time, it wasn't Ava. It was Zoe, the younger flight attendant assigned to the mid-cabin. Her voice trembled slightly. Captain Hale, I think something's wrong up here. Marcus pressed the button. What's happening, Zoe? There was a soft shuffling sound. Then, Zoe's whisper came through the line. Passengers are arguing. Some are saying the flight isn't safe. Others are defending you. It's getting tense. Evan's jaw dropped. This is getting out of hand, Zoe continued, her voice thinner now. A man from row 6 says if the captain was questioned, he wants to see proof. He's demanding it loudly. People are recording. Marcus exhaled. Not quickly. Slowly. Deeply. Ava had created the perfect storm. Now the cabin was fractured, half afraid, half angry, and all of them looking toward him. He pressed the interphone button again. Thank you, Zoe. I'll address the passengers shortly. Captain, Zoe hesitated. I think some of them won't listen unless you say something soon. I understand, Marcus said gently. I'll take care of it. When he released the button, silence settled over the cockpit again, thick, tense, aching. Evan turned to him. This is not a normal misunderstanding, Captain. She's trying to take you down. Marcus looked out the windshield, where a line of taxiway lights glowed in the darkness like a trail leading to somewhere far, far away. I know, he said softly. You're going to talk to them, aren't you? Evan asked. Yes. But what if it makes them panic more? Marcus lifted his shoulders in a slow breath. Then I speak with the tone they need, not the words they want. Evan nodded, trusting him. Marcus reached for the PA switch. He hesitated for one heartbeat, a single, small moment to collect himself. His father's voice whispered in the back of his memory. When a lie travels fast, son, the truth must walk steady. Marcus clicked the switch. For the first time since boarding began, his voice filled the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Marcus Hale speaking. From the cockpit camera, he watched dozens of heads lift. Passengers leaned forward. Conversations stopped. I understand there have been concerns. I want to address them clearly. His voice was soft, steady, deep enough to ground the fear drifting through the cabin. There is no safety issue. None. My credentials are valid. This flight is operating under full federal regulation and airline procedure, and you are safe. A hush fell over the rows. I know you've heard conflicting things today, but I want you to hear this directly from me. I have been flying aircraft for 27 years. I have landed through storms, mechanical failures, and emergencies most people never imagine. Your safety is not just my responsibility, it's my promise. Someone in row 7 lowered their phone slowly. A woman wiped a tear from her cheek. The tone in the cabin softened not entirely, but noticeably. Marcus continued, If any of you would like private reassurance, I will make myself available after takeoff, once we reach cruising altitude. For now, please trust me to do the job I've dedicated my life to. He clicked off the PA. Evan looked at him with something like admiration. I think you reached them. Marcus didn't answer, because he knew one thing with chilling clarity. He hadn't reached all of them. And one person, the one who mattered most, was smiling quietly in the forward galley. Ava. Her expression said it plainly. This was far from over. The aircraft pushed back from the gate with a gentle jolt, the ground crew's flashlights waving in precise choreography beneath the fading glow of terminal lights. Inside the cockpit, the hum of the engines deepened, rising from a soft vibration to a steady roar, familiar, consistent grounding. Marcus guided the aircraft through the initial taxi with smooth, practiced movements. Every control input was confident, measured. He had always believed that flying wasn't about force, it was about finesse. Even now, with tension crawling under his skin, his hands never trembled. But the cabin behind him, that was another story. The interphone was silent. too silent. A silence that didn't feel like calm, but like the moment an orchestra holds its breath before a dramatic note. Evan glanced toward him. The PA helped, he said quietly. People are calmer. For now, Marcus replied. You don't believe it will last? Marcus shook his head. Fear doesn't vanish with one speech. It hides. Evan finished the thought, until something triggers it again. They shared a glance that said more than words could. Evan was young, but he understood enough to feel the shift in the air. Tower cleared us to taxi via Bravo, Evan said, returning to the checklist. Roger, Marcus replied. They continued their coordinated flow buttons, switches, confirmation calls. But Marcus's attention kept drifting to the cabin camera. The still image of passengers settling into their seats gave him little comfort. He knew fear. He had lived with it. And he knew when fear had not truly left, but simply changed shape. As they approached the runway, Zoe's voice crackled through the interphone. Captain Hale, it's Zoe. Her whisper carried tension, barely controlled. Marcus pressed the button. Go ahead. Something's happening in the aft galley. A small group of passengers. They're discussing whether they should refuse takeoff. Evan's eyes widened. They're staging a protest? Zoe took a shaky breath. Not loudly, but it's getting heated. One man said he wouldn't trust his life to a captain who got flagged by security. Another passenger told him to sit down and shut up. They almost shouted. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Is Ava there? A pause. Yes, Zoe whispered. And? Marcus asked, though he already knew. She isn't calming them. She's listening and nodding. Marcus exhaled slowly. He felt something inside his chest tighten, not anger, not fear, but that heavy familiarity of injustice creeping closer. Zoe, he said gently, return to your jump seat for takeoff. We'll handle the cabin once we're airborne. But Captain, that's an order, Marcus said softly but firmly. Yes, sir, she whispered. The interphone clicked off. Evan stared ahead, stunned. This is unbelievable. I mean, at what point does she stop? Marcus answered quietly. When she gets what she wants. And what is that? Marcus didn't respond. Not yet. He advanced the throttles slowly as they taxied toward the holding point. The lights of the runway shimmered ahead, long white lines guiding them into darkness. Once they came to a stop, waiting for departure clearance, Marcus leaned back slightly, letting himself breathe. The cockpit was quiet, except for the occasional radio chatter. Evan broke the silence. Captain, can I ask something personal? Marcus nodded. Has something like this ever happened to you before? Marcus's eyes softened not with surprise, but with the weight of memory. He didn't answer immediately. He let the silence sit, not as avoidance, but as thought. Finally, he said, not like this, not this coordinated, but moments. Yes. Evan listened intently. Marcus continued, his voice low and steady. When I started flying, I faced skepticism, not outrage, just doubt. Doubt disguised as questions, doubt disguised as jokes, doubt disguised as routine procedure. Like what? Evan asked. Marcus smiled without humor. Like being asked if I was shadowing the real pilot, or being told I must be part of the diversity initiative before the term even existed, or having a passenger refuse to believe I was in command. Evan shook his head. People really said that? They didn't always say it, Marcus murmured, but I could see it in their eyes. He paused, looked down briefly at his hands resting on the throttle. There's a difference between ignorance and malice, Evan. I can forgive ignorance. I've seen it change. But malice tries to grow roots. Evan swallowed. And Ava? Marcus looked straight ahead. She's not acting alone. The younger pilot hesitated, absorbing that. Just then, the radio crackled to life. Tango 78, you're cleared for takeoff. Runway 2, 7 right. Marcus straightened. Cleared for takeoff. 2, 7 right. He advanced the throttles. The engines roared louder, pushing the aircraft forward, accelerating smoothly down the runway. Lights blurred past the windows. The nose lifted. The aircraft rose into the dark sky. Takeoff felt clean, strong, a moment of clarity in the midst of uncertainty. But Marcus knew the calm wouldn't last. At 10,000 feet, the cockpit lights dimmed automatically. Evan engaged the autopilot, and the aircraft eased into a steady climb. Marcus took a breath and reached for the interphone. "I should check on the cabin," he said. "Want me to come?" Evan asked. Marcus shook his head gently. "No, stay here. Keep everything steady." He unbuckled, stood up, smoothed his uniform, and stepped into the cabin. The moment he appeared, several passengers stiffened. Their eyes tracked him with anticipation, some hopeful, some anxious, some ready to judge. He walked slowly, offering a small nod to those who stared. When he reached the mid-cabin, he found Zoe standing near the galley, her eyes wide and apologetic. She whispered, "They're tense, Captain. Really tense." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I'll handle it." Then he stepped toward the aft galley. 3 passengers stood there, 2 men and 1 woman, voices low but heated. Their faces were tight with a mixture of fear and anger. The man from row 6, the one who had demanded proof, was speaking loudly enough for the cabin to hear. "I'm not risking my life just because the airline wants to save face," he said. "If the flight attendant says she doesn't trust him, that's enough for me." Marcus stopped just a few feet away. The man turned. His expression faltered when he saw Marcus standing there, calm, composed, steady. It wasn't the face of a man hiding anything. It was the face of someone who had carried storms before. "Sir," Marcus said gently, "if you have concerns, you may speak with me directly." The man's mouth opened, then closed. His anger slipped, revealing something more fragile beneath it, fear. He stammered, "I just want to be safe." "And you are," Marcus said softly. "I wouldn't fly you if you weren't." The woman spoke next. But she said, Marcus didn't look at Ava, who stood nearby pretending to rearrange supplies. He didn't acknowledge her at all. Instead, he kept his attention on the passengers because that was who mattered. "Whatever anyone implied," Marcus said, "I'm telling you the truth. You're safe. The aircraft is safe. The flight is safe." The passengers exhaled, their bodies loosening slightly. Then, for the first time, Ava spoke. Her voice was quiet, controlled, calculated. "I never said the flight was unsafe," she said. "I simply said I had concerns." Several passengers' heads turned again. Marcus studied her. "Concerns based on what, Ava?" A faint smile curved her lips. "Professional intuition." Zoe flinched at the phrasing. Marcus remained still. "Is that the story you're choosing?" Ava shrugged lightly, as if the entire nightmare unfolding was trivial. "I'm just doing my job, Captain." "No," Marcus replied softly. "You're doing something else entirely." The small group of passengers watched the exchange with wide eyes. Ava blinked innocently. "I'm ensuring safety. Isn't that what we all want?" A long silence stretched between them. Marcus spoke quietly, firm enough to be heard, gentle enough not to ignite panic. "Safety isn't built on whispers," he said. "It's built on truth." Ava's smile faltered. Just a hair, but enough for Marcus to see he had landed a blow. He turned to the passengers again. "If any of you need reassurance, I am available, always. But please don't let fear guide you more than fact." The man from row 6 nodded, embarrassed. The woman looked down. The third man mumbled an apology. Marcus gave them a soft smile, then stepped away. Zoe watched him return to the cockpit with a mixture of relief and awe. But as he walked, Marcus felt something in the air shift again, not fear this time, but tension tightening into something sharper. He knew this wasn't over, because Ava had built something dangerous. And dangerous things rarely stayed quiet for long. The moment Marcus stepped back into the cockpit, he felt the shift. Evan didn't speak right away, but the tension in his shoulders said everything. "How bad is it?" Evan finally asked. Marcus lowered himself into the seat and exhaled slowly. "Manageable. For now." Evan nodded, though worry still clouded his face. "For now" seems to be the theme tonight. Marcus didn't disagree. He reached forward, adjusted one of the overhead switches, and let the familiar click soothe him. Flying had always been his sanctuary, his sky, his calm, his place of truth. But tonight, the cabin behind him was a storm he couldn't outfly. He took a sip of water and set the cup aside carefully. "How's everything up here?" "Autopilot steady," Evan said. "Weather is clean all the way to Denver. ATC seems relaxed. We're cruising nicely." "Good," Marcus replied softly. But the calm in the cockpit didn't match the tension he felt, knotted in his chest. He could still hear the whispers from the cabin, fear, suspicion, distrust. And above all, he felt the weight of Ava's intentions pressing against the back of his mind. She was done pretending. She had shown her hand in the aft galley. And now, the real battle was beginning. 20 minutes passed in relative quiet. Evan monitored the route and checked updated weather printouts, while Marcus stared straight ahead, letting the soft glow of cockpit instruments settle his breathing. For a moment, he let himself drift into memory again, the kind that arrived without warning but carried truth. He was a young captain, 35, still tasting the pride of promotion. A passenger had refused to board after seeing him in the cockpit. "I want a pilot with experience," the passenger had said. Marcus had offered to have another crew member explain his credentials, his flight hours, his ratings, but the man had walked away, shaking his head. Later, the gate agent had apologized. "Some people just can't adjust," she said gently. But Marcus had understood something deeper that day. People weren't doubting his experience. They were doubting his right to hold authority. Tonight felt like a louder echo of that truth. Evan glanced over. "You're thinking again." "Always," Marcus said with a gentle half-smile. Evan chuckled softly, but the humor didn't last long. His face grew serious again. "Captain, what's Ava playing at? What's her endgame?" Marcus considered his words carefully. "Some people don't need an endgame. They just need an audience. You think she wants attention?" "I think she wants control," Marcus replied. "Control of what?" Evan asked. "Of the narrative." Evan leaned back, processing. "And you're the obstacle." Marcus nodded once. Evan shook his head. "I still don't get why someone would risk their job like this." Marcus sighed quietly. "Privilege comes with confidence, Evan. Confidence that consequences will land elsewhere." Evan absorbed that in silence. Then, softly, he said, "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For the world being like this." Marcus glanced at him, touched by the sincerity. "You didn't build this world," he said, "but you're seeing it, and that matters." Evan nodded, but his expression was troubled. Before either of them could speak again, the interphone chimed. A sound both men dreaded. Marcus pressed the button. "Flight deck." A voice responded, but not Ava's, not Zoe's. It was a male passenger, panicked and breathless. Captain, please, there's something wrong in the cabin." Marcus straightened immediately. "Who is this?" "It's the man from row 6, he replied quickly. The one who confronted you earlier." Evan mouthed his name silently. "Daniel." Daniel continued, voice shaking. "People are yelling. 2 men are fighting. One of them said the flight is cursed. The other said you're lying about who you are." Marcus felt a quiet, sharp pain somewhere deep inside his chest. Fear had found its momentum. And now it needed a villain. Marcus switched instantly into crisis mode. "Is anyone hurt?" "And not yet," Daniel stammered. "But it's getting heated." One guy shoved another into a seat. Evan turned pale. "This is escalating into a security situation." Marcus responded calmly. "Daniel, listen to me. Move away from them. Do not engage. I'll send a crew member." Daniel's breath quivered. Okay. The line clicked off. Marcus turned to Evan. "Call Zoe." Evan hit the button. Zoe answered immediately, breath short. "Captain, what do I do?" "They're shouting. People are scared." "Do not intervene directly," Marcus instructed. "Keep distance. Only speak from the aisle. I'm coming back." Zoe hesitated. "Ava already went to them." Marcus froze. Evan whispered, "Oh no." Marcus didn't respond. He rose from his seat with deliberate calm, even though adrenaline pulsed hot beneath the surface. He stepped into the cabin and walked straight into chaos. Halfway down the aisle, voices rose like clashing cymbals, raw, sharp, frantic. A man in a baseball cap seat, 12A, was standing, shouting, "She said the captain can't be trusted. She said it. She warned us." Another man, a heavy-set passenger from 13B, shouted back, "Stop spreading garbage! She didn't say that!" Baseball cap barked, "She implied it. Same difference." A woman nearby cried, "Stop arguing!" "Please." A child whimpered in distress. The atmosphere felt like static charged, ready to spark. Marcus stepped forward, calm, controlled. A presence strong enough to shift the energy without raising his voice. "Gentlemen," he said firmly, "please take your seats." Both men turned to look at him. 13B stepped back, embarrassed. Captain, sorry. He wouldn't calm down. 12. Jabbed a finger toward Marcus. She told us you were flagged. She said security had concerns and let you go anyway. A hush rippled across several rows. Marcus inhaled slowly. That is not true. 12A's eyes flicked wildly. Then why did she say it? I said no such thing. Ava's voice chimed from behind Marcus. She stepped forward, her expression painted with concern. It was a mask polished, practiced, perfect. I was just trying to comfort him, she said sweetly. Sometimes people mishear things when they're anxious. Marcus turned toward her, his voice dangerously calm. Ava, but she cut him off, raising her hands defensively. I swear, Captain, I only said I hoped everything was okay at the gate. That's all. 12. Shook his head violently. No. You said more. You said you weren't sure he made the right call. Ava pressed a hand to her chest. I would never undermine a captain. Gasps spread. Some passengers looked confused. Others looked furious. And some far too many looked like they didn't know who to believe. Marcus could feel the truth slipping. Not because it wasn't strong, but because lies spread faster. He lifted his chin slightly, grounding himself. Everyone, he said calmly. We are going to resolve this in an orderly manner. But before he could continue, a woman near row 10 spoke up loudly. I heard her too. She said she was worried for our safety. A collective gasp traveled down the aisle. Ava turned pale not in guilt but in calculation. The moment she realized she could lose control of the story. Marcus felt his heartbeat slow. Not speed up slow. The way it did before major emergencies. He spoke gently. Ma'am, thank you for speaking. We will handle this. But another voice chimed in, angry, afraid. A man shouted, We need proof he's legit. Someone else added, We want to see his ID. And then, the worst sentence of the night. Is he even really a pilot? A chill swept down the cabin. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He had heard that question before years ago, whispered under breath. Tonight, it was shouted. But the sting was the same. Evan appeared in the cockpit doorway, eyes wide with fear but strength too. Captain, he whispered. But Marcus raised a hand to stop him. He stepped forward, controlled, centered, steady as bedrock. You will see everything you need to see, he said softly. The cabin hushed. But not because you demand it in anger, and not because someone has fed you fear. His eyes found Ava's. And not because someone has decided that truth is optional. Ava looked away. Marcus continued, voice deep, warm, unshakable. You will get the truth, and it will not come from whispers in the dark. A silence followed, heavy, electric, waiting. He felt the shift in the room. This was the moment where the cabin would either calm or collapse. And Marcus Hale knew, in his bones, in his breath, in every earned scar, that this night had one more storm waiting. A storm that would change everything. For nearly 10 seconds, the cabin sat perfectly still, as if the air itself was waiting to see what Marcus would do next. Tension hovered like fog, thick enough to touch. Marcus could feel dozens of eyes pinned on him. Suspicion, fear, confusion. But beneath it, buried under layers of panic, he sensed something else too. Hope. Somewhere in that cabin, a few people wanted him to be the calm he had always been. They wanted a reason to trust him, and they were watching closely. Marcus inhaled, once slow, steady, and stepped closer to row 12. I understand you are frightened, he said gently. Fear is human. Fear asks questions. Fear imagines answers when none are given. The man in 12, A, swallowed, breathing unevenly. But fear, Marcus continued, does not get to decide the truth. A ripple moved down the aisle. Ava shifted behind him. Captain, maybe we should... No, Marcus said without looking back, his voice quiet but firm. Not this time. A tremor of whispering spread across the rows. Zoe hovered near the forward galley, hands clasped tightly, eyes full of concern. Evan stood in the cockpit doorway, jaw clenched, ready to pull Marcus back if things escalated. But Marcus didn't need saving. Not tonight. He turned slightly, addressing the entire cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, you deserve clarity, you deserve calm, and you deserve truth spoken directly, not twisted, not filtered through fear. He paused. And certainly not manipulated for someone's gain. Ava's face tightened, a controlled mask beginning to crack around the edges. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Then a woman in row 10 murmured, "So what happens now, Captain?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Now, we do what professionals do. We follow procedure, and we use facts, not fear." He reached into his uniform jacket and took out a slim black case. The passengers leaned forward. Ava stiffened. Zoe covered her mouth. Marcus flipped open the case slowly and held up his official airline identification card, his FAA license, and his airman medical certificate. "This," Marcus said calmly, "is who I am." He handed his credentials to a nearby passenger, an older woman with careful eyes and a steady voice. "Ma'am, would you please read the name aloud?" Her fingers trembled as she adjusted her glasses. "It says, Marcus Hale, Captain, Airline Transport Pilot License, flight hours over 22,000. A few passengers gasped. Marcus nodded. "Please pass it down the aisle." The documents moved slowly from hand to hand. People studied the seal, the hologram, the raised lettering, solid, undeniable proof. But Marcus wasn't done. He stepped back and pressed the PA button on the forward bulkhead. In a low, even tone, he said, "This is Captain Hale. I will now verify my credentials directly with the Federal Aviation Administration." He turned to Zoe. "May I have the SATCOM line?" Zoe nodded quickly and handed him the handset. Ava's face lost color. She knew exactly what the SATCOM line connected to. She also knew it recorded every second. Marcus dialed a number he knew by heart. The call connected with a soft click. "FAA Operations Center, this is Officer Ramirez." "Officer Ramirez," Marcus said clearly, "this is Captain Marcus Hale of Horizon Line Flight 382. I am requesting real-time credential verification for the benefit of my passengers." A murmur ran through the cabin like a wave. Ramirez responded immediately. "Captain Hale, we have your flight plan, your ID number, and your active ATPL on file. You are fully certified and cleared. Is there an issue on board?" Marcus glanced briefly toward Ava. "Yes," he said, "there is." A hush fell across the entire aircraft. He continued, "Some passengers have been given misleading information by a crew member, and I am addressing the situation." Another silence. Then Ramirez said, voice firm, "Captain, your credentials are valid. Your authority is unquestioned. And any interference from crew that undermines you should be reported immediately." A collective exhale swept the cabin. Ramirez added, "Is the interfering individual still on the aircraft?" Marcus's gaze hardened, not angry, not triumphant, but resolute. "Yes," he said, "she is." "Understood," the FAA officer replied. "Document everything. We will open a file." He ended the call. The cabin was dead quiet. Then a man in row 9 whispered, "Holy." He just called the FAA. A woman near the aisle nodded. "He proved everything, right in front of us." Another passenger murmured, "So she lied, or worse." Marcus stepped toward Ava. She flinched. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He simply asked, "Ava, would you like to correct the statements passengers say they heard?" Ava swallowed hard. I don't know what they think," I said. "Maybe they misunderstood." A man from row 10 stood abruptly. "We didn't misunderstand. You scared the hell out of us." Others nodded. Ava's mask began to fall away. Her eyes darted around, seeking support. None came. Marcus spoke quietly, too quietly for anger. Quiet in the way oceans are quiet just before a storm. Fear spreads fast, but so does accountability. Ava's lower lip trembled. "Captain, please, But Marcus lifted his hand slightly, stopping her gently. Not cruelly. Not vindictively. Just firmly. "This is not about punishing you in front of passengers," he said softly. "This is about protecting the cabin and restoring trust." He turned to Zoe. "Zoe, please escort Miss Thompson to the forward jump seat. She will remain seated for the rest of the flight." Ava inhaled sharply. "You're grounding me?" "Yes," Marcus answered. "For safety." A wave of approval murmured through the cabin. Zoe hesitated for a moment, not out of confusion, but out of sympathy. She was kind. She was compassionate. She didn't enjoy seeing anyone shamed. But she also trusted Marcus with her whole being. "Miss Thompson," Zoe said gently. "This way." Ava's posture stiffened, but her eyes glistened. She followed Zoe slowly toward the front, her steps small, her breathing shallow. When she sat down in the jump seat, she looked fragile in a way Marcus had never expected. But he didn't gloat. He didn't stare. He simply returned to the aisle and addressed his passengers again. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "thank you for your patience. The situation is under control. Your safety is my responsibility, and I will continue to fulfill that responsibility with transparency and respect." Someone began to clap softly. Another joined. And soon, the cabin filled with the warm, steady sound of applause, not loud, not theatrical, but real. Marcus bowed his head slightly. "Please take your seats," he said. "We'll be landing soon." When Marcus stepped back into the cockpit, Evan let out a long breath. "That," he whispered, "was one of the strongest things I've ever seen." Marcus eased into his seat, letting the door close behind him. "It wasn't strength," he said quietly. Evan blinked. "Then what was it?" Marcus looked out into the night sky. "It was truth," he answered. "And truth, Evan, carries its own weight." Evan nodded slowly. "But Captain, something tells me this isn't over." Marcus gave a faint, tired smile. "No, it's not." He adjusted the controls for descent. "But we'll be ready for whatever comes next." The cabin finally settled, though a faint tremor of unease lingered in the air like the last echo after thunder. Marcus closed the cockpit door behind him and let silence wash over him, the kind that pressed both comfort and weight onto his shoulders. Evan sat rigid, staring at the flight instruments as if they could explain the chaos behind them. When Marcus eased back into his seat, Evan finally exhaled. "Captain," he said quietly, "that was a lot." "It was," Marcus answered. Evan rubbed his hands together. "I thought it was going to turn into a riot." "So did I," Marcus admitted. But what he didn't say, what he couldn't say, was that he felt something worse than fear in the cabin. He felt a shift. Fear had found a crack to crawl into. Now it was looking for a way out. They began their descent into Denver. The sky outside was smooth, a quiet blanket of navy blue giving way to city lights below. The weather couldn't have been more stable. Yet inside Marcus's chest, something was shifting heavy and unsettled. He took a slow breath. "You think Ava will stay put?" Evan asked. "She will," Marcus said. "She's cornered. Cornered people don't lash out, they fold inward first." Evan nodded thoughtfully. But Marcus wasn't entirely sure. He had seen people fold in humility, and he had seen them fold in resentment. Ava did not strike him as the humble type. Still, the real storm wasn't Ava anymore. It was what her actions had awakened. Passengers had seen authority questioned in midair. And once doubt spreads, it doesn't simply disappear. It lingers. Marcus wouldn't let that linger become danger. He monitored the descent path, adjusting their pitch and power settings. The aircraft moved smoothly, the runway lights ahead, forming a straight white road into calm. Yet calm tonight felt like a trick. A soft knock came at the cockpit door. Marcus stiffened. Evan mouthed, "Zoe?" Marcus opened the small viewing panel. Zoe's anxious eyes peered back. He opened the door. "Captain," she whispered, "we have a problem again." Marcus closed his eyes momentarily as if bracing against the next impact. "What happened?" Zoe swallowed hard. A passenger fainted, or maybe shut down. They're breathing, but unresponsive. Evan cursed under his breath. "Another medical emergency?" Zoe nodded. "Yes, row 14, a woman in her 50s. The nurse from earlier is helping, but she says the patient's blood pressure dropped sharply." Marcus's mind sharpened instantly, clean, focused. "Did anything trigger it?" he asked. Zoe hesitated. "Captain," people were talking again. "About what?" Zoe's voice dropped. "About you. About the situation. Someone said the stress of the flight is affecting health. Someone said you're hiding something." Evan muttered. "Unbelievable," Zoe continued. "And, Captain, I think someone said something to the woman right before she collapsed." "What did they say?" Marcus asked. Zoe looked pained. Something like, "If the captain isn't stable, the flight isn't stable." Silence. Cold, heavy silence. Evan looked furious. "So now every panic attack or drop in blood pressure is your fault?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. He stared at the floor, breathing slowly, letting the truth settle. Fear was no longer whispering. It was poisoning. Marcus straightened, his voice calm but heavy. "We need to land. Now." Evan nodded. "Descent checklist? Complete it," Marcus said, "and patch me into the cabin audio." Evan's eyebrows rose. "Captain, I need to speak to them again," Marcus said. "If we land with the cabin in this state, panic could spread before the wheels even touch ground." Evan nodded reluctantly. "Yes, sir." As Evan prepared the systems, Zoe lingered. "Captain," she said softly, "I'm sorry this keeps happening." "You're not to blame," Marcus told her gently. "But I feel like—" "Zoe," Marcus interrupted, kind but firm, "your kindness is not weakness, and your fear is not failure." Her eyes softened. She nodded. He continued, "Help the nurse, keep people calm, that's all I need." Zoe straightened, determined. "Yes, Captain." She closed the door quietly behind her. Marcus pressed the button for the cabin intercom. His voice carried through the aircraft steady, deep, calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain." The cabin quieted instantly. "We are beginning our descent into Denver International Airport. A passenger on board is receiving medical assistance, and we will have emergency personnel ready to meet us at the gate." A pause. Measured. Controlled. "I know tonight has been challenging. I know fear has moved through this cabin in ways none of us expected. But I want to remind you of something important." He placed his hand on the control column, an instinctive grounding gesture. Fear thrives in darkness, in uncertainty, in half-truths and speculation. He glanced at Evan, who watched with quiet admiration. "But truth," Marcus continued softly, "does not need to shout, it simply stands." He took a gentle breath. "I stand with you tonight, and I will bring you to the ground safely." The cabin stayed silent for a long moment. Then someone clapped. Softly. Then another. Soon, applause rose again. Not wild, not chaotic, just steady. Marcus closed the intercom. But the moment he did, Evan said quietly, "Captain." Ava pushed the call button. Marcus froze. "Where is she?" "In the forward jump seat," Evan said. "But she's calling you specifically." Marcus nodded. "Open the line." Evan pressed a switch. Ava's voice came through, fragile, trembling, but strangely sharp beneath the surface. "Captain Hale." Marcus waited. I need to speak with you, before we land." Marcus's tone stayed neutral. "If this is about what happened, it can wait until we're on the ground." "No," Ava said quickly. "It can't wait." Her voice cracked. "I know you don't trust me. I know I misjudged the situation. But there's something I didn't tell you." Marcus exchanged a glance with Evan. "What is it?" Marcus asked calmly. Ava inhaled shakily. "Someone contacted me before the flight. Someone told me to watch you, to question you, to report anything you did." Marcus felt something cold pool in his stomach. "Who?" he asked. Ava hesitated. "I wasn't supposed to say his name." "Ava," Marcus said, voice lowering, "you've crossed too many lines to stop now. Who contacted you?" Silence. Long. Heavy. Then, "Arthur Reeves." Evan's breath caught. Marcus closed his eyes slowly. Reeves. A name he had hoped he wouldn't hear again. A man who sat high in corporate offices far above flight attendants, pilots, or procedures, and who had never liked Marcus. Not because Marcus lacked skill. Not because he posed any threat. But because he existed in a space Reeves didn't think men like him belonged. Ava's voice trembled again. "I swear I didn't know it would go this far. He said he just wanted a record, evidence. He said some executives were questioning your judgment and your temperament." A euphemism Marcus knew too well. Temperament. The word they used when they didn't want to say race. Evan whispered, "Captain, this is bigger than we thought." Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "Ava," he said slowly, "is there anything else I should know?" Ava sniffed. He said, "If you made one mistake, just one, it would be enough." Evan muttered, "So they wanted you to fail?" "No," Marcus murmured quietly. "They wanted me afraid." Ava whispered, "Captain, I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I thought it was just monitoring. I didn't think it would." The intercom crackled softly as Marcus cut the channel. He didn't do it out of anger. He did it because he needed clean air. He needed clarity. He needed to breathe. Evan stared at him. Captain, what now? Marcus looked out the windshield at the glowing runway ahead. Lights lined the path like a quiet promise. Now, Marcus said, his voice steady and resolute. We land this aircraft. And then? Evan asked. Marcus gripped the controls. Then, he said softly, the ground will feel this storm. As the aircraft descended through its final 1,000 feet, Marcus felt something settle inside him. Not peace, not anger, purpose. And purpose, he knew, was the one thing no one, not Reeves, not Ava, not fear, could take from him. Not tonight. Not ever. The runway rose toward them like a long stretch of quiet judgment. Denver's lights shimmered beyond the windshield, scattered across the earth like fallen stars. The aircraft descended steadily, the hum of the engines blending with the low rush of wind outside, steady, controlled, deceptively calm. Inside the cockpit, however, calm felt like a thin sheet of ice hanging over deep, shifting water. Marcus adjusted the flaps, his motions precise, instinctive, the movements of a man who knew the sky better than most people knew their own homes. But his mind wasn't fully in the sky anymore. Ava's confession still echoed like a pulse behind his ears. Arthur Reeves. He should have known. People like Reeves didn't make threats. They made architecture. They built entire structures designed to trap men like Marcus without ever leaving a fingerprint. Evan broke the silence. Captain, do you think Reeves will be waiting down there? I don't think, Marcus said. I know. Evan swallowed. And security? Probably with him? Evan shifted in his seat. This is a setup. It was, Marcus said, but they didn't plan on the truth traveling faster than their lies. He glanced at the flight systems, beautiful, clean, steady. Not a single warning light. The real turbulence wasn't outside. It was waiting on the ground. The interphone buzzed softly. Zoe's voice came through. Captain, the patient in row 14 is stable for now. The nurse says she'll be fine until paramedics arrive. Good, Marcus replied. We're landing in 4 minutes. Zoe hesitated. Captain, passengers are anxious again. Some are saying this landing is going to be rough. They think the medical issue is connected to me, Marcus finished calmly. Yes, Zoe whispered. Captain, I hate how they're talking about you. Marcus let out a slow, quiet breath. People try to make sense of fear. Sometimes they choose the wrong target. But you've been nothing but calm, Zoe said, her voice cracked. You saved this flight. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. Not yet. He ended the call. Silence lingered between him and Evan, heavy, thoughtful, almost reverent. Gear down, Marcus said. Evan lowered the landing gear. The thump echoed through the aircraft like a final verdict. Marcus gripped the controls as the runway aligned perfectly in their windshield, a bright, unbroken path cutting through the darkness. Final approach, Evan announced. Marcus nodded. My aircraft. As they descended through the last 300 feet, the aircraft glided smoother than silk. A pilot could go his entire career without a landing. This clean ironic, Marcus thought, considering the chaos bound to follow once wheels met pavement. Evan whispered, Captain, whatever happens down there, we handle it, Marcus finished. Together, Evan added. Marcus allowed himself a faint smile. Together. He eased back on the yoke. The aircraft kissed the runway so gently passengers barely noticed the moment metal met earth. Tires spun, brakes engaged, reverse thrust hummed to life. A perfect landing. The kind that made training captains nod quietly in pride. The kind that made passengers clap, but no one clapped tonight. Fear steals applause. They taxied toward the gate. Even before reaching it, Marcus could see silhouettes through the terminal windows. Airport security, airline supervisors, suits, too many suits. And in the center of them all stood Arthur Reeves. Tall, cold, self-assured. He looked like a man who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. Evan exhaled sharply. He's here. Marcus didn't look surprised. Of course he is. He looks angry, Evan murmured. No, Marcus corrected softly. He looks exposed. Evan stared at him. You think he knows? He knows I called the FAA, Marcus said. And once that happens, people like Reeves don't feel fear. They feel inconvenience. Evan nodded slowly. Inconvenience is deadly to men like him. Marcus didn't reply. He didn't need to. He maneuvered the plane toward gate C-12, every movement deliberate. He wouldn't give Reeves a scrap of pilot error to use against him. Parking brake, Marcus said. Evan applied it. Engines began their slow, deep shutdown. The aircraft shuddered softly like a tired body releasing tension. Marcus waited for the silence that followed. It came in a wave. He rested his hands gently on the throttle quadrant. Evan watched him. "You ready?" Evan asked. "No," Marcus said truthfully, "but I'm steady." When the cabin door chimed open, the noise of the terminal flooded in voices, footsteps, whispered curiosity, tension crackling like static. Zoe called quietly from outside the cockpit. "Captain?" Marcus and Evan pushed the door open. Passengers stood in the aisle, bags clutched to their chests, eyes darting everywhere but at him. Some looked ashamed, some looked defensive, some looked relieved, a few looked grateful, but none of them looked calm. Marcus stepped into the aisle. Phones lifted, eyes sharpened, breaths held. It felt like walking onto a stage he didn't audition for. Zoe stepped beside him. "As instructed earlier, Captain, they're waiting." Marcus nodded and walked down the aisle, slow, steady, unshaken. Passengers parted like water splitting around stone. A woman from row 10 whispered, "I'm so sorry for everything." Marcus gave her a nod, gentle, forgiving. She wasn't the enemy. Fear was the enemy. At the jet bridge, Ava sat slumped in the forward jump seat, eyes swollen, face pale. She didn't speak. She didn't even look up. Marcus didn't slow. He wasn't here to punish her. He was here to face something far larger. He stepped off the aircraft. And the moment he did, Arthur Reeves stepped forward, as if claiming the space. "Captain Hale," Reeves said, not warmly, not respectfully, not neutrally. It was the tone a man used addressing someone he believed beneath him. Marcus stopped 3 feet away, close enough to confront, far enough to stay professional. "Mr. Reeves," Marcus said evenly. Reeves looked him up and down with a clinical chill. "We need to discuss your conduct." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "My conduct?" Reeves's jaw flexed. "You caused significant disruption tonight." Marcus held his gaze without blinking. "Did I?" Reeves leaned in slightly. "You escalated a situation that should have been handled internally. You contacted the FAA directly without authorization." Marcus's expression didn't shift. "I followed federal protocol." Reeves scoffed. "You've created a mess. Now the agency is requesting full internal logs. They're pulling communication records." "Good," Marcus said with quiet finality. Reeves froze. Marcus continued, "Because those records include your messages to Ava Thompson." Reeves stiffened. For the first time that night, he looked afraid. Only a flash. A flicker. But Marcus saw it. Reeves recovered quickly. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "I think I do," Marcus said. "And I think the FAA will too." Reeves's breath hitched almost invisible, but not to Marcus's trained eye. "You think you can turn this around on me?" Reeves snapped. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't lean forward. He didn't posture. He simply spoke the truth. "I didn't turn anything," Marcus said softly. "You built this trap, and you fell into it." A security officer approached, tension stiff in his posture. "Captain Hale," he said, "FAA investigators are asking to speak with you immediately." Reeves smirked. "See, they're not done with you." But the officer added, "And Mr. Reeves, you're required as well." Reeves visibly faltered. "What?" he barked. "FAA request," the officer said simply. Passengers watching began whispering. Marcus didn't move. Reeves turned toward Marcus, face tight with rage and disbelief. "This isn't over," he hissed. Marcus's voice was calm as water. "It is for tonight." Reeves's eyes narrowed. Marcus added, "And when this is over, I'll still have my wings." Reeves stepped back as if struck. Marcus walked past him, shoulders steady, footsteps grounded. Evan caught up, whispering, "Captain, you really think this will clear everything?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "I don't think," he said softly. He stepped deeper into the terminal. "I know. Because for the first time all night, Truth had more momentum than fear, and Marcus Hale intended to keep it that way. The walk from the gate to the airport administration wing felt longer than any flight Marcus had ever commanded. Not because of distance, it wasn't even 100 yards, but because of the eyes. They followed him. Some curious, some judgmental, some quietly supportive, but all watching. Evan walked beside him, shoulders tight with tension. Zoe trailed behind them, her steps soft, almost hesitant, as if she wanted to shield him somehow, though she knew she couldn't. Ahead, Arthur Reeves marched briskly, jaw clenched, flanked by 2 security officers who didn't look at him with respect, but with duty. And duty never bows to titles. Marcus kept his pace steady, his expression neutral, though a quiet storm brewed beneath the surface. Not anger, not fear, but awareness. The kind that comes from living a life where the world watches every step you take, waiting to decide whether you belong. When they reached the double-glass doors of the administration wing, one officer swiped a badge. A soft beep echoed. The doors slid open. Inside, everything was bright, sterile, humming with the kind of energy only places built for crisis carried. A representative from the Federal Aviation Administration stepped forward the moment Marcus entered. A tall black woman, hair pulled back neatly, posture commanding. Her badge displayed, Cynthia Ward, FAA Senior Investigator. She extended a hand. "Captain Hale," she said, "we've been expecting you." Her voice held something rare, professionalism, wrapped around respect. Marcus shook her hand firmly. "Thank you for seeing us so quickly. We moved fast because the data you transmitted demanded it," Ward said, her eyes sharpened slightly. "Not many captains activate the Federal Integrity Seal mid-flight." Marcus inclined his head. "Not many situations require it." Ward nodded once. Approval, glinting in her gaze. Behind her stood 2 more FAA agents and a Department of Transportation attorney, a man with silver glasses and an expression carved from stone. Reeves stepped forward, trying to reclaim control. "This has all gotten blown out of proportion," he said, forcing confidence he didn't feel. "My airline handles internal investigations. I'm not sure federal." Ward cut him off with a single raised finger. "Mr. Reeves," she said coolly, "you are here as a subject of inquiry, not a supervisor." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Zoe inhaled sharply. Evan straightened. Reeves tried to recover. "You can't be serious. I am a senior executive of Horizon Line. You oversee nothing in this room," the DOT attorney said flatly. "Sit down." Reeves's mouth snapped shut. For the first time all night, Marcus felt an ember of vindication, not triumph, not pettiness, just the sensation of truth beginning to balance itself. Ward gestured toward a conference room. "Captain Hale, please take a seat. We'll begin with your statement." Marcus sat at the long table. Evan took a seat beside him. Zoe hesitated, but Marcus nodded gently, inviting her forward. "You were a witness," Ward said to her. "We want you here." Zoe looked relieved and terrified at once. Reeves took a seat across from them, stiff, rigid like a man sitting on broken glass. Ward opened a file. "We've reviewed the sealed data, the cockpit audio, the flight plan logs, and internal messages. But we need verbal confirmation for the official record." She turned to Marcus. "Captain Hale, walk us through tonight, from the beginning." Marcus took a breath, and he told them everything, not dramatically, not defensively, just truth, steady, measured, grounded. He described the initial confrontation with Ava Thompson at the gate, the suspicious behavior during briefing, her attempts to undermine his authority, her falsehoods whispered to passengers, the sabotage attempt in the flight plan, the medical emergencies, the fear spreading through the cabin like wildfire, and finally, Ava's confession about Reeves's involvement. Ward listened intently, every detail filed behind sharp eyes. When Marcus finished, she said quietly, "Thank you. Your composure in all this is remarkable." Evan leaned forward. "Ma'am," he saved that flight. Ward nodded. "We know." Reeves let out a scoff, small, bitter, but loud enough. "Is no one going to question his version?" Reeves demanded. "He's clearly trying to protect himself. Pilots panic, too. Maybe he misread the situation. Maybe he—" Ward didn't even look at him. Mr. Reeves, she said calmly, your messages to Ava Thompson have been retrieved. Reeves froze. We have you instructing her to monitor the captain, to create reports, to question his decisions, to gather justification for disciplinary action. Reeves swallowed hard. That doesn't mean... The DOT attorney slid a printed sheet across the table. These are your exact words. He's too composed. People like him break eventually. I just need one mistake. Zoe covered her mouth. Evan stared in disbelief. Marcus didn't move. Reeves attempted a smile that failed instantly. That was informal wording. I didn't mean it negatively. It was taken out of context? Ward asked sharply. Reeves nodded desperately. Then let's add context, Ward said. She slid another sheet forward. This is where you instructed Miss Thompson to provoke panic if necessary. Reeves blanched. That's not I wasn't. Ward's expression hardened. Mr. Reeves, interfering with a pilot's ability to operate an aircraft is a federal offense. Encouraging sabotage or psychological destabilization is an even greater one. Reeves's voice broke. You can't ruin my career over this. You ruined your own career, Ward replied. Her tone held no cruelty, just truth. Reeves sank slowly into silence. Ward turned to Zoe. Miss Park, please describe what you witnessed. Zoe straightened, though her hands trembled. She told them about Ava confronting Marcus, about her sowing suspicion among passengers, about her implying the aircraft was unsafe, about the second medical emergency triggered by fear, and finally, about Ava's confession spoken in the jump seat with a voice full of guilt. When she finished, Ward said, Thank you. You handled tonight with professionalism. Zoe's eyes shone. I just didn't want anything bad to happen. It didn't, Ward said, because Captain Hale maintained control. Evan nodded toward Marcus, pride clear in his expression. Reeves rubbed his temples. This is absurd. You are believing them over me, over an executive. Ward's tone became surgical. We don't believe people based on their job title, Mr. Reeves. We believe them based on evidence. Reeves had no answer. The DOT attorney closed his folder. At this time, he said, we are placing formal restrictions on Mr. Reeves. He will surrender his devices, cannot leave the airport, and will be escorted to a holding room for further questioning. 2 security officers approached. Reeves looked around at the officers, at Ward, at the attorney, and finally at Marcus. You're doing this to me, he said, voice shaking. You think you've won because you embarrassed me? Marcus shook his head slowly. This isn't revenge, he said. This is accountability. Reeves stared at him with fury and disbelief. You don't belong in that cockpit, Reeves whispered. You never did. Marcus held his gaze. Calm, steady, unbroken. Yet here I am, Marcus said softly, and here I will stay. Reeves lunged forward, but the officers grabbed him, pulling him back. As they escorted him out, his voice echoed down the hall. This isn't over. You're finished, Hale. The doors closed behind him. His shouting cut off like a severed wire. Silence swelled in the room. Warm, clean, heavy with justice. Ward turned to Marcus once more. Captain Hale, she said gently, consider yourself cleared, fully. Marcus inhaled deeply relief, mixing with something softer. Quiet vindication. Ward continued, in fact, I'll be submitting a recommendation to recognize your actions tonight. Not many pilots could have held a cabin together under that level of psychological strain. Evan beamed. Zoe wiped a tear. Marcus bowed his head slightly. Thank you. Ward stood and extended her hand. You carried more than passengers tonight, she said. You carried truth, and you did not let it fall. Marcus shook her hand firmly. Thank you, Investigator Ward. She smiled warmly. Rest tonight, Captain. Tomorrow, the system will keep working. Marcus nodded. Tomorrow, he repeated softly. Because tonight, finally, the system had turned around, looked back, and stood with him. The hallway outside the conference room felt strangely quiet, almost peaceful after the storm that had just unfolded inside. Marcus stood for a moment, letting the silence settle along his shoulders like a warm blanket. It wasn't relief, exactly. Not yet, but something close. Evan and Zoe stood beside him, both looking exhausted, both riding the aftershock of everything they had witnessed. "You okay, Captain?" Zoe asked softly. Marcus didn't answer right away. He stared down the hallway, breathing in slowly, letting his chest rise and fall with measured discipline. "I'm steady," he finally said. Zoe nodded, though she didn't fully believe him. "You were incredible in there." Marcus gave her a tired smile. "Truth did most of the work." "No," Evan said firmly. "You did. Truth's just a tool. The right person has to wield it." Marcus looked at the young first officer, sincere, loyal, shaken but stronger than he'd been at the start of the night. "You held your own, Evan," Marcus said, "and you trusted me when it mattered." Evan lifted a shoulder. "You earned that trust long before tonight." For a moment, the three of them simply stood there, breathing the same quiet air, letting the night soften around them. Then a security officer stepped forward. "Captain Hale? Paramedics are with the two passengers. They want to speak with you briefly." "Of course," Marcus said. He turned to the paramedics waiting near the entrance. A woman in scrubs lifted her hand in greeting. "Captain Hale," she said, "just wanted to give you an update. The woman from row 14 had a vasovagal response, stress-induced. She's stable now." Marcus nodded. "Thank you for taking good care of her." "She's asking for you," the medic added. "She said she wants to apologize." Marcus shook his head gently. "She doesn't owe me anything." Fear plays tricks on people. The medic smiled with understanding. "Still, she'd like to see you. I can bring her by later." "Of course." When the paramedics stepped away, Evan glanced at Marcus. "You really don't blame her?" Marcus exhaled slowly. "Fear isn't a moral failure, it's a human one. What matters is what we do after the fear passes." Zoe whispered, "If everyone thought like you, this world would be a lot calmer." Marcus chuckled faintly. "If everyone thought like me, airlines would move a lot slower." They all laughed, even if briefly. A few minutes later, another voice called from behind them. "Captain Hale?" Marcus turned. A man in a navy suit approached, broad shoulders, gray beard, eyes clear and observant. His badge identified him as an airport director. "Name's Richard Lawson," he said. "I help oversee airport operations here. Investigator Ward told me what happened." Marcus nodded politely. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Lawson. You handled yourself with more dignity than most people could muster under pressure," Lawson said. "I've seen pilots fall apart during far less." Marcus dipped his head. "I've had a lifetime of practice." Lawson studied him, something thoughtful shifting behind his eyes. "I'm aware," he said quietly. "Men like you often do." It wasn't said with pity or admiration. It was said with recognition. Lawson took out a business card. "If you need anything while you're in Denver, anything at all, call me." Marcus accepted the card. "Thank you." Lawson nodded once and stepped away, leaving behind the faint scent of respect, an aroma Marcus had learned to distinguish from politeness long ago. When they returned to the conference room to gather their belongings, Marcus spotted someone sitting just inside the doorway. Ava Thompson. Still in her uniform, still wearing the weight of the night like an oversized coat. Her eyes were red, her hands twisted tightly in her lap. She looked smaller than before, diminished, fragile, folded inward. She stood the moment she saw Marcus. "Captain Hale, may I speak with you?" Evan stiffened. Zoe took a step closer to Marcus instinctively. Marcus raised a calming hand. "It's all right." Ava swallowed hard, struggling to find her words. "I know I can't undo what I did," she began, "and I can't excuse it. I let myself get pulled into something I didn't fully understand, because someone with power made it sound justified." Her voice cracked. "But the truth is, I was jealous of you." Marcus's expression didn't change, but neither did it harden. Ava looked down at her hands. "You walk into a room with authority I'll never have. You hold calm. I can't even pretend to understand. People trust you instantly, and I let that make me bitter." She lifted her eyes wet, trembling. "I thought, if I could expose one mistake, I could matter. I could be important. I could prove I wasn't invisible." Marcus inhaled deeply. A confession like this wasn't typical. Not from someone backed into a corner. Not from someone who had caused this much harm. But tonight had broken many things open. "When Reeves contacted me," Ava continued, "I felt chosen, needed, seen. I didn't think about the damage. I didn't think about the people on board. I didn't think about you. A tear rolled down her cheek. And now, my career is over. Evan looked away. Zoe blinked rapidly, emotions swirling. Marcus studied Ava quietly. Not with anger, not with vengeance. With understanding. Hurt people, hurt people. That was a truth he had seen too many times. Ava, he said softly, you made decisions that had consequences. Serious ones. But the reason behind your decisions, that matters too. She sobbed, once quickly muffled. I'm sorry, Captain, she whispered. For everything. You deserve better than what I did. Marcus nodded gently. I accept your apology. Ava froze, swallowing hard. You do? Yes, Marcus said, because carrying resentment would only chain me to the same harm you've been carrying. Ava covered her face in her hands, overwhelmed. Marcus waited until she steadied, then added, What you do next, how you learn from this, that's what defines you now. Ava nodded through her tears. Thank you for not hating me. Marcus didn't respond with forgiveness or absolution. He responded with truth. Take responsibility. Start over. Do better. Ava nodded again, quieter this time, humbled. Then she stepped away, escorted gently by an HR representative who had been waiting. Zoe whispered, I didn't think she'd apologize. People surprise you, Marcus said softly, especially when the truth has finally landed. Later, after most officials had left, Marcus remained seated in the empty conference room, letting the quiet soak in. Evan returned from a brief call. Captain, headquarters wants you to take a mandatory rest period. They're setting you up in a hotel nearby. Marcus nodded. Good. You want me to stay with you tonight? Evan asked. I mean, not in the same room, I just mean close, in case. Marcus smiled gently. I'll be all right, Evan. Evan nodded reluctantly. Zoe peeked around the doorway. Captain, your passengers left a message at the gate. They asked me to tell you, thank you. For everything. Marcus blinked slowly. Passengers rarely thanked captains after chaotic flights. They thanked them for turbulence-free journeys, for smooth landings, for fast arrivals, not for nights like this. What exactly did they say? Marcus asked. Zoe smiled softly. One woman said, Tell him he carried us through more than a flight tonight. Marcus swallowed quietly. Evan grinned. They're right, you know. Marcus looked down at his hands, steady hands, the same hands that held aircraft controls through storms, combat missions, and tonight's psychological gauntlet. Let's hope tomorrow is quieter, Marcus said. Zoe laughed lightly. Captain, you've earned a month of quiet. Marcus chuckled, then stood. As they left the administration wing, Investigator Ward appeared again, blocking the exit with a purposeful stride. Captain Hale. Marcus stopped. Yes? She handed him a sealed envelope. This is unofficial, she said, but I wanted you to know. He opened it. Inside was a short letter on FAA stationery. Recommendation for commendation. Captain Marcus Hale. For exceptional composure, adherence to protocol, and preservation of safety under extraordinary circumstances. Marcus read the words slowly, the weight of them settling deep. Ward smiled softly. You carried a lot tonight, she said, but you didn't carry it alone. Remember that. Marcus held her gaze. Thank you. Ward nodded and stepped aside. Evan whispered, You deserve that, Captain. Zoe added, More than anyone I know. Marcus tucked the letter into his jacket. Let's go, he said. We still have work tomorrow. Zoe laughed. Captain, tomorrow's problem can wait. Marcus smiled. Maybe, he said, but purpose doesn't rest. And as they walked into the cool Denver night, Marcus felt the weight he carried for years begin finally to lighten. Not gone, but lighter. Because tonight, for once, the truth had not been the burden, it had been the light. The hotel room was quiet in a way the cockpit never was. Too still, too soft, the kind of silence that made every thought echo a little louder. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, shoulders relaxed but mind alert, processing the night piece by piece. The clock on the nightstand glowed 2:14 a.m. He should have been exhausted. But exhaustion feels different when the soul has been carrying the load, not the body. After a long moment, he stood and walked to the window. Denver stretched beneath him, rows of lights, quiet streets, the faint hum of a city resting. He pressed a hand to the glass, feeling its coldness seep into his palm. A knock sounded at the door. Marcus turned. Yes? It's Evan. Marcus opened the door to find the young first officer standing there, still in uniform pants and a t-shirt, hair messy from running his hands through it too many times. Couldn't sleep? Marcus asked. Evan shook his head. Not really. I just wanted to check on you. Marcus stepped aside. Come in. Evan sat on the chair by the small desk. He looked conflicted, tired, but wired at the same time. Captain, he said softly. Can I ask you something? Of course. Evan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. How do you do it? He whispered. How do you stay so calm? So centered? Even when people push you, undermine you, doubt you, for reasons that have nothing to do with flying. Marcus looked at him for a long time, thoughtful and quiet. Then he sat across from the young man. When I was your age, Marcus began, I believed that being excellent would protect me. Evan's brow furrowed. Protect you from what? Marcus smiled sadly. From everything excellence isn't strong enough to stop. He continued, voice low but warm. I worked twice as hard, stayed twice as quiet, made twice as few mistakes. I thought discipline and dignity would shield me. But the world doesn't always reward dignity, doesn't always recognize excellence, and doesn't always see people like me for who we are. Evan swallowed hard. So what changed? He asked. Marcus looked out the window again. I stopped trying to earn permission, he said, and I started living on purpose. Evan absorbed that. Marcus added, calm isn't natural, it's chosen, and choosing it every day is the hardest work I've ever done. Evan's voice cracked. I'm sorry people make you carry all that. Marcus shook his head gently. Don't be sorry for the weight I carry. Be aware of the weight you can help lift. Evan nodded slowly, like someone realizing the world was larger than he'd ever seen before. A soft chime from Marcus's phone broke the moment. It was a text from Zoe. Captain, I hope you're resting. Passengers left more messages at the gate. I saved them for you. Good night, sir. Zoe. Marcus smiled faintly. You should get some rest, Marcus told Evan. I will, Evan said. But Captain? Yes? I meant what I said earlier. I'm proud to fly with you. Marcus's chest tightened with a feeling too warm, too deep to label. Thank you. Evan. Evan left quietly. Marcus returned to the window. The city lights blinked back at him steady, grounded, alive. Hours later, morning arrived, softly sunlight sneaking through the blinds, warming the carpet, edging along the furniture like it was painting the room awake. Marcus dressed slowly, fighting the stiffness in his shoulders. The adrenaline of the night had faded, leaving behind a thoughtful heaviness. He made his way to the lobby. Zoe spotted him first. Captain! She hurried to him, eyes bright, holding a small envelope. These were left for you. He opened it. Inside were handwritten notes from passengers, dozens of them. Short messages, simple messages, human messages. Thank you for your calm. You saved us. I misjudged you. I'm sorry. You reminded me of my father. He always said real strength is quiet. You carried us. I won't forget that. You were the only calm voice in a sea of fear. Thank you for protecting us from ourselves. Marcus felt something shift inside him. Not pride, not vindication. Something gentler, something healing. He looked at Zoe. Thank you for keeping these. Zoe smiled. You deserve to read them. Evan joined them moments later, jacket over his shoulder. You ready, Captain? Marcus took a quiet breath. Yes. They walked out into the bright Denver morning, the cold air crisp against their skin. A shuttle drove them toward the airport. As they passed the rows of planes lined along the tarmac, Marcus felt a familiar warmth in his chest, his life, his calling, his sky. Captain, Evan said. Marcus looked at him. You think they'll fire Reeves officially? Evan asked. Marcus nodded once. I think the system is doing what it was built to do now. And Ava? Zoe asked softly. Marcus exhaled. She has consequences to face, but she also has a chance to rebuild. What she chooses next will define her. Zoe nodded thoughtfully. And you, Captain? Evan asked. What comes next for you? Marcus looked out at the runway, long, steady, waiting. What always comes next, he said. Another flight, another cabin, another chance to carry people safely. Evan smiled. You really never stop. Marcus chuckled. Purpose doesn't rest. When they reached the terminal, Investigator Ward was waiting. Captain Hale, she greeted. I thought I'd see you before you left. Marcus shook her hand. I appreciate everything you did last night. Ward shook her head. All we did was listen. You did the heavy lifting. She slipped him a small card. My direct number. Anytime you feel the system isn't doing its job, call me. Marcus accepted the card with quiet gratitude. Ward looked at him with a softness she hadn't shown the night before. You carry a lot, Captain, she said. But don't forget some of us are out here carrying with you. Marcus nodded. I know, and I'm grateful. Ward gave him a brief smile before stepping away. Evan whispered, She really respects you. Respect is a two-way street, Marcus said. She earned mine. Inside the terminal, people moved with morning energy. Families huddled around suitcases, workers rushing to gates, the smell of coffee floating through the air. Life was normal again. As if the night before had been a storm, only a few had felt. Marcus walked toward the window overlooking the runway. A plane lifted off in the distance, smooth, steady, rising against the morning light. He watched it climb, watched it disappear into the sky. Zoe approached gently. Captain, what are you thinking about? Marcus kept his eyes on the sky. That storms come and go, he said, but the sky remains. Zoe nodded slowly. Do you ever get tired of carrying so much responsibility? Marcus turned to her. I don't carry responsibility, he said softly. I carry people. Zoe smiled, small, heartfelt. And that, Marcus added, is why the wait is worth it. As they made their way toward the crew transport exit, a familiar voice called out, Captain Hale! Marcus turned. It was the woman from row 14, the one who fainted. She approached him slowly, leaning on her husband's arm. She looked healthier now, though her eyes were still red from the strain of the night. Captain, she said, voice trembling. I needed to say this in person. Marcus stepped closer, gentle and patient. I'm so sorry, she whispered, for doubting you, for letting my fear distort everything. Marcus shook his head. You were scared. Scared people don't think clearly. But you stayed calm, she said. You kept us safe even when we didn't trust you. That's something I'll never forget. Her husband placed a hand over his heart. Thank you, Captain. We owe you more than you know. Marcus smiled softly. You owe me nothing, he said. Just travel safely, and treat each other kindly. The woman wiped her eyes. You're a good man, she whispered. Marcus bowed his head. Take care, he said. Both of you. They walked away, hands clasped tightly. Zoe exhaled. Captain, you heal people without even trying. Marcus chuckled. I just try to leave people better than I found them. Evan nodded. Well, mission accomplished. Outside, the sun was fully up. The sky was wide open, clear, bright, endless. Marcus paused at the curb, letting the warmth settle over him. He felt lighter. Not undone. Not unburdened. Just lighter. Evan looked at him. Captain, you ready to head home? Marcus smiled. Yes, he said, and ready for whatever comes next. He took one last look at the sky. A sky he had spent a lifetime learning. A sky that had tested him, challenged him, lifted him, and tonight finally reflected him honestly. Then he turned to his crew. Let's go, Marcus said. And together, they stepped forward. Into the morning, into the quiet, into the future. Stronger, clearer, unbroken. The story of Captain Marcus Hale reminds us that no matter how far we've come, the world still contains places where bias tries to shrink a person before they even speak. Yet it also shows something deeper, something many of us, especially in our later years, have learned through hardship. Dignity is not loud. Strength is not cruel. And character is revealed not when life is gentle, but when it becomes painfully unfair. Marcus teaches us that staying calm is not weakness, it is mastery. That truth doesn't need to shout, it needs to stand firm. And that when the world tries to define you, you still hold the power to define yourself. His journey is a reminder for all of us. Asterisk, to speak up when silence becomes harmful. Asterisk, to stand with those who've been pushed to the margins. Asterisk. To trust that integrity, though quiet, always outlives prejudice. Asterisk. And to believe that justice may move slowly, but it moves. In our daily lives, we may never sit in a cockpit or face a crowd questioning our worth, but we all carry moments of doubt, moments where we feel unseen or underestimated. Marcus's story calls to something universal. Stand tall, even when you tremble. Stand true, even when others doubt. And stand kind, even when the world is anything but. Thank you, truly, for spending your time with this story. Your presence matters, your empathy matters, and your voice helps stories like this rise above the noise. If this touched you, even a little, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps these meaningful stories alive and brings more light to the places that need it most.